Remember back in part 2 when there was an issue with this shelf partially blocking the clear air coming into the fan, and what could be done about it?
Well, if you're not interested in this, then just skip ahead to the time mark shown there.
Well, one of the ideas was that I could move the fans closer together, and that would just get them away from that shelf. Remember this here back in part 1 showing to scoot the fans together, and I think now it's a better idea than the way I did it. You see, I cut my plate out like this, and I've got that space there, and you might worry, well, if I put the fans together, their space is going to get awful thin. In fact, it'll get so thin it'll disappear. There'll be nothing there on the aluminum plate, but it's really no problem. I've done it before, and it's plenty strong enough just like that. So if I could do it again, I'd prefer this way, and that would help get my fans away from that shelf. Now the other idea we talked about to get the fan away from that shelf was to add more washers here on the plate mounts. But with the fans far apart, I ran into a washer stacking limit, because here on the back side the fan's starting to hit against this bent-in funnel part. See how there's almost no room there with just the washers I've got. So mounting fans closer together, adding more washers, would minimize the bad effect that shelf has on the clear airflow into my fan. Now it's too late for me for these options because I mounted my fans too far apart, but I did mention a radical option in part 2. This is the area in question, and I don't like it, so I'm opting for the radical surgery option. Drivers, start your engines. Careful now, don't mess up my nice beveled edge on that fan plate. Now I've got to clean up all the burrs and sharp edges on that mess. Still a few more. Getting better. Yeah, okay. Those are brand X versions of the well-known Dremel tool, metal cutoff disc, chainsaw sharpening stone. Now to enhance the effect even further, I'm going to take this section and stretch it and bow it in. It's already done here, but I'm just going to show you how with the rubber mallet. Here's another view of the area just pounded and stretched right there. And you see it's all masked off and a couple coats of the galvanized painting on both sides. It's back to the cereal box cardboard template routine and cutting out aluminum roof flashing. I took my time bending the arc to lay exactly flush in the cutout. After lining the cuts with adhesive, here's the patch set in there. The only critical thing is that the bottom edge doesn't stick out proud of the part bent in with a rubber mallet. The top part doesn't matter so much. The air's already gone into the fan by then. So this side could be big enough to just come all the way up and almost touch the fan plate. While the adhesive's still wet, I held down the patch and smoothed the adhesive on the back side. Here's our first look at it from above. You can see the air going to come up through there real nice. Now after it dried for a day, I wiped more adhesive on the back side of it to give it a little more strength. Here's looking at it from inside the cabinet. Here's looking at the back side. Good thing I wiped that adhesive smooth before it dried. There's the stretched hammered part. So what was sacrificed by doing this? Well, this shelf is actually the framework boundary for the water-soaked cooling pads. So I don't really think anything got harmed by doing this. But you might think, well, if you were going radical, why didn't you really go radical and just cut straight across and take that whole piece completely out? Then you'd really get a good clear shot of air into the fan. Well, that's true, but your new patch would be squeezing down on the cooling pad, and you'd have to relocate those two holes, which secure metal rods that hold the cooling pads in place. Maybe some variation of that could be worked out to be okay.
So that's the completion of the radical option.
When putting the top back on, I had a few of the sheet metal screws strip out on me. So, no problem, I just took the screw to the hardware store and found out it was a number 8, so I just got a number 10, and they go on up 12, 14, bigger and bigger diameters in any length you want. They come in Phillips head, hex head. I prefer the hex so I can use a 1/4-inch drive socket adapter there to hook into my cordless drill and easily drive the bigger screw in. Now on with the water pumps. There's the stock one I got rid of, and here's the type I'm going to use. There's 2 examples. The only problem with these is that they can't run dry. The company does have other models with dry run protection, but not in the specs I need. I'm going to protect the pump from running dry with this little float switch, and I'm going to connect it in so whenever the water gets low, the pump shuts off and a warning light will flash on the cooler panel inside my home. So there's the factory float valve, keeps the water inside at the right level, and I am going to mount the float switch back there where it's out of the way but convenient enough, and you see it'll be floating up there when the water's full. Come right about there, it activates and shuts off the pump. I mounted this float switch in a piece of angle aluminum that was bent up past 90 degrees to get the float to be horizontal when water's full. You see on the outside, here's where I mounted the float switch bracket. Stainless steel caulked holes above the water line. Notice this factory galvanized screw already corroded after only 1 year. I think the reason is my water level is too high up there at the red line. It should have been down there at the blue line. So I need to make an adjustment to the factory float valve. The blue line shows where the water should be, and I need to bend the float valve right there. Got to be careful up here because that's real fragile. So when bending, I always keep the float below the full up position. So with both hands, I grab the float arm there and force the end down, bending the rod right there in the middle. Easy, a little goes a long way, and that should lower the water level. Establishing the correct water level is important here because I have to figure out how high or low to mount this float switch. So right there is where it would shut off the pump. It's pretty far down, so I've got a bit of leeway. So this little pump puts out the same amount as the factory one, but it uses less than 20 watts instead of 80. So how does this pump match up to the factory plumbing? The black wand and gray tubing are factory and they can still be used here. But the gray tubing is too big for this pump. So I got some clear vinyl tubing at the hardware store, 3/8 ID, and it fits snugly on both the tubing and the pump, probably without a clamp. So let's take this little puppy for a test drive. This is the 10-liter version, but I'll turn it down to 6 or 7 to match the factory pump. More water isn't necessarily a good thing. It'll overflow the canals that distribute the water and go who knows where. The higher the lift, the harder the pump has to work. Now, if the humming sound of this pump bothered me, I could get a 1/8 inch thick piece of neoprene rubber to sit underneath it. Here's the sound with the volume turned way up. Now remember, this pump can't run dry, so I added a float switch to protect it. But the circuit needs a little more to it. So this is an electronic controlled switch called a relay, and they're very common in the automotive field. They usually have a 30 or 40 amp rating, which is more than enough. And I need the one that has the 5th prong in the middle, single pole double throw. This is just a 24 volt version of it, a little harder to find. This wiring plug makes it easy to connect to the relay. Sometimes it comes with the relay. I made sure it had the 5th prong there in the middle. In the electrical department, don't want to skip this step. Installing circuit protection. Could be DC circuit breakers or fuses like these. So if there's ever an overload or a short circuit in the power supply or the cooler's components, a fuse will blow, preventing further equipment damage, even a house fire. It's cheap but effective insurance. These are a common auto parts store type, and the holder is a heavy-duty version, bigger wire size and a cover cap to keep moisture out. I'm going to use two, one for the main power supply, the other for the pump. Let me introduce the little magic box that's going to control the speed of the fans and turn them off and on. It's rated for 50 volt max and 60 amp max.
There's where the power source and the fan wires connect.
I chose this one out of the many varieties of this type out there for its easy to mount insulated cover box, its large, easy to access wire connectors, and its capacity to handle just about any fan load situation I might have. I'd like to mount this control switch in the cooler's original switch box. So to that end, here's the part I see inside my house, and there's the cooler control switch. It's going to take it out of the cabinet and gut the original switch. This control switch doesn't quite fit in there like the original. It's a little on the small side, but it's close enough to work with. So this little flat washer, I want to leave it on there so it's on the inside. Now the hole's bigger than the switch, so I found this thin stainless steel washer that fits snugly down around the shaft, and that'll make a good foundation for the nut to squeeze down on and be tight. Everything electrical in the cooler comes back to this box in these 4 connectors, so it's nice that they're easily accessible and big size. That'll make wiring it a lot easier. And this is how it's going to look when it's all put together. There's another switch and some lights to go, but that's basically how it's going to be.